Hey guys, Caleb here with DSLR Video Shooter, and this is a small, tiny cinema camera rig that I've been obsessing over for, I don't know, months at this point. I'm really excited to finally share it with you guys. In short, it is a full frame, raw recording cinema camera that also accepts SSDs on this little back sled here and can be powered with Sony MPF batteries, has a monitor, a tiny handle, a really great lens, an itsy bitsy little matte box, and I absolutely love this thing. And it's kind of hard to show off on camera how small this thing really is, because it does look somewhat beefy with all of the accessories that are currently mounted. But as an example, I can actually hold this thing, operate the camera, and adjust focus very comfortably because of the size and weight of this thing. So I wanted to make something that was compact but also super versatile, that didn't have any gotchas. So battery is for real on these. You can use Sony MPF batteries, the large ones or small ones if you want to keep the package nice and light. And there's other features like this SSD mount, which you can find in the description. I'm essentially building these with 3D printed parts, and you can take an SSD like the Samsung T5 or T7, plug it in, and now record raw video to it. It has all the other stuff you need. It's got a real cinema lens. It has a matte box. I've got a monitor here with power supplied to it. So everything's powered off of a single battery plate on the back. So let's dive into all the parts I used to build this thing. Then now would be a good time to disclose that no manufacturer mentioned in this video is sponsoring this video. That said, this and all of my videos are supported by those of you who have purchased my camera guides, LUTs, or camera gear. So check the links in the description, and thank you guys so much for the continued support. Let's start with the camera. So why did I go with the Sigma FP? I've actually done a review on this a while back when it was first announced, and I was pretty critical of this little camera. But at the end of the day, and the reason I chose it for this build, because it is one of the most powerful compact cameras available right now. It can record 12-bit raw video to SSDs via USB-C, has a full frame sensor, and is still one of the smallest form factors in the market right now. It's really impressive how much you're getting for the money. And I really mean this next part. I love the image on the FP. I loved it when I first reviewed it. I still love it today. We'll talk about the FP and raw video workflow later on in the video, but now we need to move on to putting this little beauty in a camera cage. The current FP cage you can buy right now from SmallRig is excellent, but I wanted something even smaller, so I went with the original SmallRig FP cage. Unfortunately, it's no longer available, so you're going to have to purchase this used or stick with the newer model. For me, no camera rig is complete without a top panel, and I found this adorable tiny one from a SmallRig, and I think it works perfectly with this build. It's super minimal. It's just large enough to be functional, but not so big that it kind of takes away from things, and you still are able to access the SSDs without interfering with the handle. For the lens, I decided to go with the 7 Artisans 35mm T2.0. This fast full frame cinema lens looks fantastic, and manual operation is silky smooth with gears if you need to run a follow focus setup on this thing. That said, you could opt for smaller L-mount lenses or use an adapter with vintage glass, but I've done several videos on 7 Artisan lenses and really do dig the image and the unique look that you can achieve with them, and I just really like how they operate and the size. Again, I'm going for something compact here, so these were a perfect fit. And they have other mounts available too if you're not going to go with the Sigma FP, so keep that in mind. In front of the lens, I am using the Tilta Mini Matte Box, which to my knowledge and research is currently the smallest 4x5.6 matte box on the market under $100. You can also buy or 3D print an 85mm clamp-on ring, so you don't have to use those annoying threaded ring adapters or 15mm rods. You can keep things nice and tidy. All right, now let's start to work on the rear of the rig, which houses an SSD sled and a battery mount. To mount all of this gear, I use this Arca Swiss plate, which has mounting holes on the back. This will eventually connect the camera to the SSD dock and power adapter to turn the FP into a tiny cinema camera. Using 2 of the 3 holes on the rear of the Arca Swiss plate, I mounted this SmallRig cheese plate and put sticky foam on one side so that it wouldn't scratch up the rear display on the Sigma FP, since we're gonna have this thing butted right up against the camera. From there, I went ahead and mounted this 3D printed SSD mount. There are two versions I designed, one for the Samsung T5 and the other for the newer Samsung T7 drives. If you have a 3D printer, I'll be selling the files down in the description, and I'm gonna print as many of these as I can for you to purchase. So all of that will be down in the description if interested. And these will work with any camera that can record over USB-C to an SSD. It's the same thing as having it plugged into the camera, but unlike that, you have the option to pull the drives out and quickly add a new one instead of dealing with clamps and cables and all that fun stuff. Putting everything together is super easy. Simply bolt the main body of the dock to the base using two M4x6 flat screws, then stick the angled USB-C cable into the cutout and having the cable exit through either the left or right side of the dock. Next, you can insert the SSD drive and plug it into the USB cable to make sure your alignment is correct. From there, you can use two M4x12 flathead screws to tighten down the dock lid, which will firmly hold the cable tightly in place in the correct orientation so that you can simply remove your SSD and it'll stay in place when you plug it back in. You now have an SSD dock for your USB-C camera. Now to mount this to our rig, I took that cheese plate from SmallRig to mount the SSD dock in the orientation you see here. On the back of the SSD dock, you can mount another cheese plate before adding more gear if you'd like, but I decided just to mount my power plate directly to the 3D printed dock. And to learn more about mounting options for the dock, check out the dedicated video over at the Camera Foundry YouTube channel to learn more. And that brings us to power. The FP's batteries don't last that long. It's designed to be super compact, so we're going to be adding our own power source. And for that, I opted to use this SmallRig MPF battery plate, which has two outputs, one for the camera running at 8.4 volts and another jack for 12 volt devices like our monitor, which we'll take a look at in a second. I use the two included screws to mount the battery plate directly to the 3D mounted dock. Just make sure you don't over tighten because again, this thing is 3D printed. And from there, I finally added the camera and started working on custom cables. I bought a dummy battery for the FP, but didn't like the connector length and wanted a right angle. So I measured and cut the cable, soldered on a new angled connector, and really dig how clean it turned out. If you don't know much about soldering, you should definitely consider learning because it is so nice being able to have really tidy camera packages like this, and it doesn't take a lot of work to get these cables corralled. With power sorted, I moved onto the camera monitor, which I will be connecting with this friction mount bolted onto our handle. The original inspiration for this entire build was this tiny camera monitor, which you could totally use with a rig and really does fit the bill as the world's smallest monitor and rig. But after building the SSD dock, I decided to make this just super duper functional and something you would actually want to go out and use instead of just being tiny. I decided to go with this, the Portkeys PT5 Mark II, as it is still super small and lightweight, but has a more usable 5-inch display and tons of assist features. To power the monitor, I also made another custom cable to run from our battery plate up to the monitor. And rather than run both HDMI and the power cable to the monitor separately, I decided to use a short piece of wire loom, which I bought on Amazon, to make a single cable that goes from the camera to the monitor. And while this single cable is very thick, I love how clean it turned out. This is it when it comes to going from the camera to the display. To tidy up the ends of this cable run, I used a short piece of Velcro, and then I secured the end of that cable loom using one of these really cool SmallRig cable organizers, which I recently discovered and have been loving on rigs like this. And with that, we now have a tiny, super compact, super versatile cinema camera. Now, some of you might be looking at this thing and think to yourself, that's still pretty chunky. Why not just go with a larger camera? But the concept I had for this build was a no compromise tiny cinema camera system for capturing the highest image quality possible while sticking on a budget, and I think I've done that. You won't find another camera for $1,900 that has a full frame sensor, captures raw video directly to SSDs, at this size. And this whole rig fits comfortably in small bags, and with DaVinci Resolve at your side, you have so much potential with this setup. Now, those cinema DNG files are crazy large, so you're going to need a lot of SSDs, but the nice thing is there is a workflow that works really well for reducing file size. So you capture everything in RAW, you pull it all into DaVinci Resolve and you do whatever base corrections you might need to make. And again, I covered all of that in my initial review. From there, you can go ahead and export whatever kind of files you're going to be editing. So for me, as an Apple user, that would be ProRes files. And then your file size significantly reduces. And if you want to, you could get rid of the original raw files because you now have a really easy, small codec to work with and no longer need those giant raw files. So again, check out my full review to learn more about the Sigma FP and see that raw workflow in action. But for tiny, compact setups, I don't think you're going to beat this thing. So that's gonna wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and keep in mind, you can take any of the things and ideas from this video and apply it to other cameras, not just the Sigma FP. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned because I had so much fun building this. I now want to go out and build several more super customized camera rigs. So if you have a suggestion as a camera you'd like to see me modify or customize, let me know down in the comments and we'll definitely get to work on more of these down the road. Thank you so much for watching, guys. For those who have purchased camera guides, LUTs, or gear like these SSD docks, thank you so much. You guys are keeping sponsors off of these channels. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.